Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 105 of USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and once again, so grateful for your time today. And while all of our episodes, I think, are valuable and worth your time and just, top-notch content, this is an episode I've been really looking forward to sharing with you, and one that I'm guessing at least some of you have been anticipating and also looking forward to. Today I'm going to interview and introduce you to Pastor Aaron Box. Aaron, as many of you know, was recently appointed as our new USMB National Director, taking over from Don Morris coming up this summer in July. Aaron is currently the lead pastor at North Park Community Church in Eugene, Oregon. And many of you may not know Aaron yet, especially if you live in the Midwest or California, some of the kind of USMB hub spots. You may not get to interact with our friends from Oregon very often. So Aaron has been in the USMB family for a long time. He's been on the USMB Leadership Board. I personally didn't know Aaron before this conversation, but man, I really enjoyed my time with him. He did a great job answering some questions, and I'll be honest, I threw him some kind of harder, kind of curveball questions, but he did a great job answering them, and I just really enjoyed getting to know him, and I'm excited about his leadership. So if you don't know Aaron, or even if you do, I think you'll enjoy getting to know him better today. So let's get right to it. Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll get to my interview with Aaron Box.
Ready to shape your future and make a meaningful impact? At Fresno Pacific University, they are more than just a university. They are a community where your dreams are nurtured and your potential thrives. Their focus on a Christ-centered education runs deep from the classroom to the field. With flexible programs, small class sizes, and supportive faculty, you'll find the personalized education you deserve. Whether you're starting your first degree or seeking a new career path, Fresno Pacific University is here to help you succeed. Apply today at fresno.edu and start your journey to a brighter tomorrow.
All right, my friends. Well, today I have the privilege of introducing most of you to a very important person in all of our lives. I'm excited to introduce you to Aaron Box. Aaron recently was announced as the new USMB National Director. He's currently pastor of an MB church in Eugene, Oregon. And really today we're just going to kind of hang out and talk. Aaron, get to know you a little bit. So Aaron, thanks for being on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So as we're recording this, it's kind of end of May. So you're just really, I guess at this point, a couple of weeks into the announcement. So I guess really we just want to get to know you. I know I'm kind of in one of the MB meccas here in Kansas, and you're up in Oregon where a lot of people don't get to visit as often for kind of the MB hubs. So let's just get to know you, Aaron. So I know you had several positions over your career. You've kind of been all over the place from what I gather from your bio. So why don't you just jump in? Tell us, where are you from? How did you get to Oregon? We'll just kind of get to know you a little bit.
Right. So yeah, you're right. Eugene isn't exactly a hub of Mennonite Brethren or really anything involving the church. It's a pretty unchurched area, some place I would call post-Christian in a lot of ways. But I've been married to my wife, Jen, for a little over 23 years. We have two children. My daughter, Elizabeth, is a junior at Bushnell University here in town. She loves biblical languages. I think that's what her major is actually shifting to. And then my son, Charlie, is about to start his senior year in high school. But like a lot of Oregonians, my story starts being born in LA. A lot of us come from Southern California. We don't want to admit it, but in about 1980, I was 6 years old, and my grandfather on my father's side had what is now known as ALS, and they were in Salem, Oregon. And so my dad, my mom, our family, some uncles and aunts and cousins, and a number of people on that side of the family who were all over Southern California, essentially all moved into the same neighborhood in West Salem. And so that was my elementary years, which were really rich, just being surrounded by a family who Jesus was at the center of all of that. And then going into sixth grade, my dad got a job in Eugene, about an hour south of Salem. And so ever since, this has been home for me. And one of the unique things is for the last 13 years, I have been pastor at the church I grew up in. And so that's been a fascinating dynamic. I still have 5 or 6 people there who remember me as an out of control middle and high school student. And it's pretty wild to get to be in the role that I've gotten to have in their life for the last decade plus.
It's kind of nice to have those people in your life, right? It kind of humbles you a little bit when they remember those days of your youth to now be the guy in charge.
Absolutely.
That's a humbling experience.
Absolutely.
So has MBE world always been a part of your life, or I guess so. If that's the church that you're in now, when was that? When was the USMB influence first in your life?
Yeah, to be honest, so growing up, I would say I was sort of like Protestant mutt. We were, part of a covenant church, a couple Baptist church, independent, non-denominational churches. And really, we landed at North Park here in Eugene because at the time my parents had started attending what's First Baptist Church downtown and found out I was sneaking out after they dropped me off for middle school group and was going down to the arcade and playing video games instead of going to church because I couldn't connect with anyone. And so somebody invited us to North Park, and I connected with a group of students, and my parents were excited to see my faith grow. And so that's really why we ended up at North Park. And even though that was home for my formative years, I would say I really had no idea what it meant that we were MB. It wasn't a core part of our identity. We're North Park Community Church. The name isn't in there anywhere, and it wasn't really emphasized. And so when Jen and I got married, I was a youth pastor for a number of years in an independent Christian church. Then we were part of a church plant outside of DC. And then when we were invited to come and lead it at North Park, that's honestly really when I fully began to dive in and understand, our heritage and who the MBs are. And I just remember reading our confession of faith and being so blown away by how it doesn't go beyond scripture. And I saw it seeking to use the language of scripture, which was different than a lot of the doctrinal statements I had seen. And as I got to know our story, I just fell in love.
Yeah. So it sounds like with the first church you were at, things just didn't really click. You weren't really interested in hanging out at youth group, it sounds like. So when would you say that when did you come to faith? Was that you were a Christian, but you just didn't really connect? You didn't have any friends, or did your faith not really come alive until later? Or more about your faith journey?
Yeah. So, I was in California, so I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my memory is terrible. So it's amazing that I do remember this, but I was in a Sunday school class and, prayed to receive Jesus. And in my frame of seeing the world, Jesus was Savior. That's how I understood the world. And when I got into my teen years, I think my faith started to get real for me. I was baptized when I was 12, but I was still playing this dance of, one foot in the world and trying to be doing what my friends at school were doing, and then one foot and trying to be a good Christian. And it was really early on in college that I was in a retreat, and there'd been a number of other experiences on some mission trips and things, but really it crystallized for me this idea that Jesus didn't just want me to believe in him, but wanted me to serve people with my life and to follow him. I don't know that that was a specific point kind of calling to ministry, but before that, it was just sort of like this incremental sort of growth and understanding through a number of years.
So you finish up high school you've got the kind of a little bit of a call to ministry at that point in your life. Walk us through, school, seminary, what came after high school, and we'll kind of step by step get into your career experience as well.
Yeah, and so I think maybe a good framework to understand my journey is I was diagnosed with significant ADHD at 35. So I grew up totally undiagnosed, but like very significant challenges with, homework and things like that. I was the kid that got 98 on tests and couldn't get his homework done and was always frustrated. And so I was originally going to go into engineering, and that's kind of when I felt that, hey, I could do this the rest of my life, but it feels like God's calling me to something else. So I went to Multnomah Bible College up in Portland. And in the middle of that, I think I was just finishing my sophomore year. I was on academic probation because I had started in community college. And of course, grades are really based on tests. So I was doing fantastic.
Okay.
And when I got to Multnomah, homework was everything. And so I really struggled. But that created a window of about 2 years where I found myself in a job I had no business having, managing trade shows for a software company, and you kind of experienced a number of things that refined what I didn't want to do, and figured out I wanted to be a student, and went back and finished at Multnomah. And through all of that time, I should say, I was involved as a volunteer in various youth ministries. I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
But it took me 7 years to get through my undergrad.
Okay.
And then from that point, I went overseas briefly as a missionary who worked with military dependents. So kids
Okay.
whose parents were in the army. I was sort of a youth pastor on a military base, and then came back and got married. And Jen and I jumped into ministry at that point. So
Cool. And you were in Germany, is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. That sounds like
Darmstadt, Germany, about an hour out of Frankfurt.
okay. Awesome. Cool. I'm sure that was a huge ministry opportunity to reach out to those kids and those young people.
It
So
was also affirming that it wasn't a good fit for me because kids were rotating in and out all the time. So you
mhm.
can only get so deep with them. And I think I realized I was wired relationally to be a little more vested in the people that I serve.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was an incredible experience, but yeah, it really helped refine that wasn't what I was called to. So
Okay. But did I hear you right that was kind of your first ministry experience and then youth pastor came after that? Is that right?
that was my first paid ministry experience. Yeah,
Okay.
I had been, an intern and a volunteer, had helped start a college group when I was in Portland. There'd been a number of things in there, but yeah, that was the first job in
Okay.
ministry.
Cool. And then youth pastor after that, was that in Salem as well? Or walk us through what comes next?
Yeah, that was in Seaside, Oregon.
Okay.
And we were there for a little over 7 years. Um, Seaside is on the very north coast of Oregon, just a few miles south of the Columbia River. It is a rough place to live. I grew up in Oregon and thought it rained a ton in the Willamette Valley. Then I moved to the coast and realized, well, at least it rains vertically in the valley because it rains with 7-mile-an-hour winds out there. And it's a really depressed economy. And with that comes a lot of substance abuse, child abuse, all those things you don't want to have leading your state statistically in. And so I did youth ministry there, and it was really unique because about 90% of the kids in my youth program, their parents didn't go to church.
Hmm.
And a lot of them came from really broken places.
Mhm.
And so we were there for 7 years. It was a remarkable experience getting to build into those kids' lives. For the first 5 of those years, had an amazing mentor as a
Hmm.
senior pastor. And during that time also, we started to feel called to plant a church.
Hmm.
And I thought we were praying in great faith with a couple we were friends with, and we told God we'd go anywhere west of the Rockies. And so he moved to Virginia. So
Right. Nice. Okay. So walk us through. So that was a church plant. Was that affiliated with, was that MB or how did that,
no,
tell us
that
about
was
that?
through an organization called Stadia.
Okay.
And while we were still on the coast, I had started a master's program in church planting because that's
Okay.
where I thought we were headed. And they sent me to, at the time, I think it was the biggest church planting gathering called Exponential back in Florida.
Yeah.
And I was there, and from the moment I landed, the people I were interacting with kept telling me, "Oh, you need to meet this guy Ron," because I was the guy from the Northwest who loved all things outdoors, and so I met this guy Ron. We bumped into each other at a dinner during the conference and started talking, and like we could finish each other's sentences as
Hmm.
far as philosophy of ministry, what we were envisioning. And it was this wild experience that within like 3 hours, both of us who had never met each other
Hmm.
uh, pretty much knew we were supposed to work together.
Huh.
And Jen was still back in Seaside. We had 2 little kids. And so I remember calling her that night and saying, I didn't know how I was going to tell her, hey, I can't explain this, but I think we're supposed to be a part of this plant that's going to be outside of DC. It's so out of left field.
Okay.
And when I called her thinking she was going to, think I was crazy, her response was something along the lines of, well, let's pray about that. Because if that's what God's opening the door, then who are we to say no to that?
Yeah.
And by the end of that, 3-day conference, I pretty much had committed us that we were going to be for Virginia,
Wow.
and came back. And within a number of months, we went through a church planting assessment
Hmm.
and sort of boot camp thing. And I think it was in the spring that Ron and I met. And by August, we were in Virginia.
Wow.
So it was a pretty wild experience. It was the last thing I expected to have happen. And, I didn't end up finishing that degree because I had gone to school to be able to plant a church. And then
Okay.
planting a church going, why would I keep taking these classes?
Yeah.
That took us all way out east. And the plan was we were going to plant restore. And then in 2 years, they were going to send us out to, sort of rinse and repeat and plant another church along the mid-Atlantic states. And it was during that time we had actually come back to Oregon, trying to do some support raising and share stories. And we were at North Park. They had an interim pastor. Actually, it was Rick Ashbaugh.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people know Rick. He
Friend of the pod.
And Rick asked me if we could go grab coffee after church, and pretty much asked Jen and I if we would consider applying to be in that role, which, it was a wild experience because North Park was really the low point. When we got there, if our whole family was there and everybody showed up, I think there was 25 people, and they had gone split in some rough years. I remember being in Virginia talking with Jen about, is this what we're supposed to do? And to be quite honest, there was a little bit of worry of, am I going to go be the hospice pastor who has to go through the pain of closing a church and probably kill my resume? And, and I started talking that way. And pretty much before I could finish that thought, Jen kind of called me out and said, Aaron, we moved all the way across the country to certain people we had never met. And you're telling me we would hesitate to go back and do the same thing for people who poured their lives into us for years? Yeah. And it was a well-needed correction. And it's just obvious that was what we were supposed to do. And so, then 13 years ago, we moved back across the country after less than 2 years and came back to Eugene.
Wow. Okay. And so it was Sterling, Virginia. Is that right? Is that like I'm not super familiar. Is that a straight up DC suburb, or how close is that to DC?
Yeah. So most of the people in Sterling either work in DC or like one connection removed. Sterling's just north of Dulles Airport, which is a landmark for a lot of people. And so most of the people who were there, a number of them would take a pretty vicious commute into DC to go to work. And there was also, all of the various agencies, FBI, CIA, all of those were within 20, 30 minutes. And so that was a wild thing. We had people at our church plant who worked for all these different government agencies. And so, everybody had some sort of connection either to the government or to a government contractor, or their company had sent them to lobby or, something like that. So
I imagine going from Oregon to, kind of what I picture Oregon, rainy, kind of outdoorsy, that Oregon to DC, Virginia, and then back. Like that's a pretty dramatic change, I imagine. Or were the churches kind of night and day different, or did you find that there's a lot of similarities, or how would you compare and contrast those two churches?
Yeah, well, there's a couple pieces. One, we came from Seaside, where the average income for a household was, I think, under $40,000.
Oh,
and
wow.
moved into the richest per capita county in the country.
Okay.
And, there was a dealership down the street from our church that had Lamborghinis and Ferraris and, all that on the lot. That was very different from, Seaside, Oregon. So there was a big economic kind of social difference, but culturally, in the Northwest, people kind of live for the weekend warrior kind of thing. And people work so they can play largely. And where we were, people worked so they could work more so they could get ahead. And, a lot of folks who were part of a restore got up very early, maybe had an hour commute into work, maybe longer, worked 10 hours or so, and then had that commute back home.
Wow.
And so when we would talk about things like, a community group or a small group, it was really shocking to me at first that the response often was, why would I have time for that? Why would I want them? And whereas that was very native to my culture. So that was probably one of the biggest differences. And just, I used to joke that in Loudoun County, where we were in Virginia, that the Copernican revolution hadn't happened there yet because people thought the universe revolved around them. And that not that things revolved around the sun. And so very, very self-centered culture, very driven, trying to get ahead, which again is very different than the Northwest.
Yeah. Wow. So very different backgrounds. Okay. So going back to North Park, remind me when did you start as lead pastor there?
Yeah. 13 years ago.
13 years ago. Okay. So up until present day, can you tell us more if people aren't super familiar with North Park after, so you kind of mentioned that they were kind of on hospice, using your words, it was kind of not maybe very healthy. What does it look like today, and how has it kind of evolved as long as you've been there?
Yeah. We're still a small church, but we're we're healthy. I'd say we're vibrant. We're very engaged with our neighborhood. That's, I think, an anecdote that kind of describes where we were at. The elementary school that my kids went to school at is right across the street from the church. I can see it out my office window.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being there to pick kids up one day, and all the conversation about what do you do for a living kind of happened with a parent. And they asked me, I said, well, I'm a pastor. And they said, well, where are you a pastor at? I said, well, North Park Community Church. And they said, well, where's that?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's
right there,
literally right there, across the street. Yeah. Their response floored me because they said, oh, that's a church? We didn't know that. There's a big cross on the wall, And when we got there, you could draw a pretty big circle around where the church was, probably close to a mile radius, and nobody there attended the church. And we were not known in our neighborhood. And so one of the biggest changes, I think, over the years has been we have become very much a neighborhood asset. We're known as the church that serves the schools and throws a big block party and does everything we can to love our neighbors. I remember it was a celebration when we needed to build a bike rack because it was necessary because people in the neighborhood were coming to church.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts that's taken place. COVID, of course, really grounded put a stop to some of those efforts.
Sure.
We've done a lot around food insecurity in kids, and most of that work involved, a couple hundred people in a room together, which for 2 or 3 years was a pretty hard sell. So, so we're in a process right now, I'd say, of rethinking how do we most effectively connect with our neighborhood. And restarting some of those things.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, it's great to kind of have your background. I feel like I kind of know you a lot better already. So I kind of want to, we might come back and cover some more ground later, but I want to shift a little bit and kind of talk about USMB, your new role, the future. I've got a lot of questions about that. So the national director position, obviously it's a very important role. A lot of people listening knew Don or know Don very well. We respect him. We have a lot of, it's a big, important role. Absolutely. One of my first questions is I feel like I have at least a little bit of a sense of how hard it is. That's a hard role. So when the position came up, what in your mind was like, oh yeah, that's something I want to tackle?
Yeah. I'll back up and say, for those who don't know, I spent 8 years on the leadership board, and I would just say I fell more and more in love with our national family, and more convinced that, we're positioned to really have a significant witness to our culture. And so I knew that Don's retirement was coming, and to be quite honest, when the announcement came out, I didn't really give it much thought. I love my church and wasn't looking to make a change, and it is a position that you can't fail at. There is when I first was thinking about it, it was a little daunting. We need to be planting churches. We desperately need to be developing young leaders. We need to be doing a better job of discipleship, all of those core commitments. Yeah. We have a lot of room to improve in. And so it's a no-fail position. And, here I am, comfortable, love my church, things have been going good. And I had a couple of conversations with some leaders in our family who suggested, hey, you should consider applying to this. And the first one of those, I didn't even really take that seriously, to be honest. It just wasn't on my radar. And as I began to think about it, began to get excited about it, and had some of the wisdom voices in my life consistently say, hey, Aaron, I think your gifting is wired really well for this, and you have some strengths here. And had another call from another leader. And when they said, hey, would you please apply for this? My question was, why? And there was an articulate answer that, sounded like me. And so Jen and I started discussing that, and her response was kind of, what is there to think about? This is such a good fit, come on, Aaron. And I wondered if being in Eugene would sort of cross me off the list of prospects, because again, this isn't an epicenter of MB churches. But I think as I've gone through this process, and I would just affirm the leadership board and the search team put such a thorough process together. There were numerous interviews and questions, but the deeper I got into that process, the more just excitement I got, the less overwhelming it felt, to be honest. I think I do believe that this is what God's calling me to. And
Yeah.
I think there's alignment with gifting, but I think, that doesn't matter if it's not where God has you. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was a process, and the excitement level kind of went through the roof about halfway through, and it went from, am I sure I'm serious about this, to I don't want to get my hopes up because I really hope this works out. I'm excited about this. And of course, here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, I can hear you, even just in the past few sentences, you've said a lot of the right words. So the church planting, the development of the youth, discipleship, those are all things that we've been talking about for a long time, as you know. So I'm going to put you in a little bit of an awkward spot because you just mentioned that several people said your gifting was a good fit for this. So what were people saying? Or you can tell us, what are your gifts? What are your passions that you feel like are a good fit for this?
Yeah, I think one of them, the word nuance was used in my ability in conversations. It's never been something I've chosen, but I always have found myself in mediating roles in conflict,
Hmm.
and helping people who disagree, find their points of connection. And so I think that's a needed strength, just to bring people together, to get on the table together. I think, I got an MBA a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and that process for me, I think, solidified. I have a real love for helping organizations become really effective and
Okay.
efficient. And so I think, if you look at our org chart, which, shout out to Boris Borislav, he did a great job with it, but it's confusing. We have 2 universities, a foundation, a missions agency. We co-own with our Canadian colleagues. We have 5 districts. I mean, you start looking at these arrows going everywhere. And I think one of the things that is an area of opportunity for us is just finding greater alignment with all of our stakeholders and institutions, and certainly all of our churches.
Hmm.
Um, I think when I look at our 220 plus churches, and I don't know if everyone realizes this, but on a typical Sunday morning, only about 120 of those churches have services in English. We're a pretty diverse group of people, and if we were all pulling together in the same direction, as I think about, having been in both mid-size and large and small churches, I think small churches often think they maybe don't have a role to play in church planting.
Hmm.
I would say, if we can get our smaller churches to understand, those who haven't, some do certainly, but understand that they can play a direct role in that, I just think there's so much opportunity for us to see some wonderful things happen. And my experience being in a small church, we have numerous interns, we have a residency program, we have
Hmm.
some set of money set aside to actually be a part of a church plant. And I think we're good evidence that a small church can do these things.
Yeah. Cool.
So I think I can speak into that a little bit. As a former church planter, that certainly helps on the church planting side. But a lot of experience just developing young leaders directly too. And so, yeah, I think all those play into who I am and what I bring to the table.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Again, I have kind of a awkward question. I'm not really sure how to ask it, but it seems like we've kind of hinted around this, that Eugene isn't really a USMB hub. I think if people are connected and they pay attention, but they're not super in the know, it would have made a lot of sense to pick someone from Hillsborough or Fresno or Enid, or like that's kind of the like home turf of MB lands, right? So I think for a lot of people, they're like, oh, who's this guy from Oregon? And
Right.
you're
Right.
you're very much an insider. Like you've been around for a long time. You've been on the leadership board. You've been a pastor for a long time. But I think you do. I think you bring a kind of unique perspective in that you've been around. You're very plugged in. You know a lot of the leaders, but you're also in this part that's maybe underrepresented in USMB leadership. I guess, is that true? And how have you kind of thought about that process?
Yeah, and one of the questions I was asked in the interview process was I willing to relocate? And when I
Okay.
said no, I really thought maybe that was the end of this conversation.
Okay.
And of course, one of the follow-up questions is, are you willing to do a lot of traveling? And we were fortunate that our family's at a perfect point for this. With, by next year, Jen and I will be empty nesters.
Hmm.
It's a full-time job at the university here in town. Um, and so, travel is going to be a big piece of this. But I do think being in neither of our 2 epicenters may actually be a strength, because sometimes there's a perceived, you know, I don't think it's a power struggle, but a perceived, them a little bit more maybe than we want to admit.
Hmm.
And feeling like I'm a bit neither of those, I think allows me maybe a different voice. But the truth is, regardless of where I am, our churches are in 26 states.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of travel involved in this job. And one of the things I think most of us recognize, in fact, we're doing this right now, is since COVID, a lot of us, whether we love it or not, spend a lot of time on Zoom and have realized you don't have to always physically be present to get
Yeah.
things. And I think also just, even the part of my story we spoke of the diversity of places that I've lived, even in the US, of different cultures, has given me an ability to adapt quickly to the culture I'm in and to try to understand it and embrace it. So
Yeah, awesome. And we've hinted already that obviously Oregon and then DC area, those are very different cultures. A lot of our MB churches are rural, a lot of Midwest, a lot of small towns, and I guess percentage wise, a lot of our churches probably look a lot different from the churches that you've been. But again, I wonder if that's maybe a strength. We kind of know how to plant small rural churches. We don't have much experience in places like Eugene or DC. So is that kind of part of what you're hoping to bring to, is a little bit of a diversity, or are you like, no, USMB is really good at this, let's keep doing that? Or how is that going to play out? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think what I hope is to help our churches see where their strength is at and what they have to offer to our family, and to find value in those different types of churches, right? Because there's a lot of difference in being a bivocational pastor in a very rural place or being at a church that has a staff of 20, right? Like they're very different experiences. They're very different ways of doing ministry. And so, yeah, I think I actually would say our Seaside experience culturally was a rural church. It was a church of about 400 people, 350, 400 people, but the mentality was, I think, very much like a rural church. And so I don't think that's a foreign thing to me.
Yeah. You mentioned that, I think, was it North Park or Seaside? I'm not sure, but when you were younger, you said you didn't really even realize it was an MB church. But you read the Confession of Faith and kind of got to know a little bit. And I kind of get the impression again, I'm gonna speak in generalities. We have some MB churches who are MB to the core. They go to all the meetings. The MB Minute Brethren stuff's all over the website, every pamphlet. It's very front and center. And then we have another group that's kind of like, oh, we're proud to be MB, but it's not going to be a very core part of our identity, at least outward facing. And we've seen over the past, I don't know, decade or so, there's kind of changing thoughts on denominations, and are they a good thing or a bad thing? How much should that be a big deal or a little deal? You just talk about denominations in general and maybe MB specifically, some of the different philosophies that are out there right now.
Yeah, one thing I would say about kind of my experience is I am MB by choice, right? Like I wasn't born into this. I didn't grow up really with this identity. And I think because of that, maybe I have a different approach to our identity. You may have noticed Box isn't exactly an MB last name.
Right.
And so, like at North Park, one of the things we've done is we regularly have an after church Sunday afternoon potluck where we sort of present this as who we are, and this is what it means to be MB. And so I've had to sort of teach that and work on my chops on that for a while. And so I do think there's some value to that. And again, our mix of that Anabaptist peacemaking with, somewhat, this word now means different things to different people, but that theologically evangelical approach married to that, I just think we have a very unique role in the kingdom and a very unique offering to a fractured nation that's super polarized. And so as far as denominations in general, obviously when you see the more top-down hierarchical controlling denominations, it's pretty easy to see some negativity there and some things that aren't really helpful. And then on the flip side, you look at a more sort of by consensus group like the MBs, and there's a lot of value to the fact that we're choosing to say yes to working together. We're not forced into it. But with that is also a danger that we have to choose yes. We have to decide. And I think part of the role nationally is to communicate why that matters. What is the benefit for a church who has all of these different opportunities to, to give to things, to be engaged with things in their own communities. What's the benefit to being connected with other MB churches?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of those things that we're going to have to articulate well,
Yeah.
because that is more of a challenge for us, because we do have that choice. We're not a conference where, like North Park, as I'm transitioning, nobody's saying this is who your pastor's going to be.
Right. Right.
They have to go do that work and find that. We have resources to help in that, but it is different than a lot of other denominational structures.
Yeah, definitely. You've kind of hinted a couple of times that there are kind of uniquely MBA distinctives that you're proud of, excited about. I think you said earlier that even right now is a good time to be MBA. This is a time that we can really take advantage of our strengths. Expand on that, like looking ahead in your leadership. What about MB do you feel like is a good time for America right now?
No. Well, when we live out our value of peacemaking and do that well, man, that's so countercultural right now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the conversations I've been having with a number of people lately, and I'm not sure I articulate this as well as I want to yet. So this is sort of rough draft of an idea, right? But when you think about like the goal of theology, the goal of doing the work of theology, I think it's quite common right now for the goal to be to have the right answers, to defend truth, to root out, things that are incorrect. They certainly value those, but there has to be a higher goal. And the way that I've been articulating this is that, our theological work has to increase our capacity to love God and to love our neighbors. And so that has more to do than just how we think, it's how we live that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that, in a culture where you and I, it would be very normal for us to agree on 95% of the world,
Yeah.
but that 5% informs us that we're enemies of each other, right? Like we see
Yeah.
this social issue different, so you're them, you're those people, and now I'm going to divide from you.
Yeah.
I think when we are actively living as peacemakers, engaged, willing to, and wanting to be in relationship with people who 5 or 10%, think differently than us, maybe 90%, that is so unique right now and so needed. And I think in that, it creates so many doors for the gospel and to present, why are you different? Why are you being nice to me when we totally disagree about this?
Yeah.
I think the danger for us, and the reason I said specifically when we're actively living out our peacemaking, is it's really easy to think of peacemaking in terms of like global issues or national issues.
Yeah.
And think of it in terms of my relationship with my family or my neighbor or my coworker who's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy for us to fall into a sort of passive approach that we think is peacemaking that is really maybe more avoidant than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the extent that we can be engaging, be intentional in seeking to love people and letting that our theological beliefs work out and increase our capacity to be obedient to God, love God, and directly connected to love our neighbors. I think we have something really unique there, and it shouldn't be unique, but I think the peacemaking for us really sets a foundation for something that is entirely countercultural right now.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, that's very much needed, especially in an election year, right? We're going to get rattled here a lot here in the next few months. So,
right.
So I might be asking you a kind of repeat question, but as you again look ahead, other than the peacemaking element, what else looking ahead, like what are you excited about? What's next? What do you hope to implement, or what are you really excited about? What's super exciting looking to the future for you?
Right. So the mandate of this job is 3 core commitments. It's church evangelism and church planting, creating a I think deeper culture of disciple making and leader development. And I think I'm excited about all 3 of those. I'm excited to see us planting more churches than we are right now. I think ever since COVID, we've been in a bit of a, obviously that set a lot of things aside. Sure. But I think directly connected to that is just our need to develop young leaders. And so I'm very excited to throw myself into that work. That's something I've already been doing. And, the negative maybe way of putting this is I don't know that people realize the cliff that we're about to go off of right now.
Yeah.
The fact that, I'm 50, which It feels old. My son reminds me of how old I am all the time. But if I get in a room full of pastors, I'm still the young guy usually.
Yep.
It's not that many who are younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real problem 5 years from now
Yep.
if we don't very, very quickly address that. And so I think to work both on the urgent piece of that of engaging people in 20s and 30s, even 40s, and saying, hey, maybe it's a career change. Is God calling you into to some sort of vocational ministry? But all the way down to our junior hires, high school students to be able to do a better job working together to give them a vision for what I learned, what I experienced when I was in college. This idea of oh wow, Jesus doesn't want me to just believe in him, but like my whole life is supposed to be oriented around this, and I'm supposed to serve people. And so I'm excited about that work. And I think if we do a great job of raising up leaders, we're probably going to have an easier time finding people to plant churches.
Yeah.
And of course, all of that is rooted in discipleship. Part of my personal story, and I love this because I think when we talk about discipleship, it sounds really overwhelming to people. Like, I don't know how to disciple somebody. Like, is there what's the program I should use, or is there a book we should go through?
Yeah.
When I was in high school and kind of all over the place, there was a guy by the name of Greg Taylor at North Park, who he was just out of college at the time. He had worked with the Navigators, and he caught me after church one day and just said, hey, Aaron, would you be interested in getting together for coffee and just reading through First Peter together? And that was the beginning of a really significant relationship for me. And Greg, I don't think he had a specific program he walked me through. He just taught me to love the scriptures and to talk about Jesus and seeing the world through a different framework. And when I think about that experience, it reminds me that discipleship should be a very natural thing for us. I think just about anybody listening to this probably has the capacity to grab somebody at church and say, hey, do you want to go grab coffee and let's read through John together? And start to share life together. And so I'm excited about the potential of helping more of the folks in our church family own that call to make disciples and understand that it doesn't have to be daunting, that they're fully capable of that the same Holy Spirit that's in our most charismatic leaders is also at work in their lives and has gifted them. And so as I mentioned earlier, both to see our whole church family see that they have a role in church planting, but also to see all the individuals in our churches better understand that they are fully capable of sharing what they know and helping somebody follow Jesus and making disciples. That's really exciting to me.
Yeah, that is exciting. I like that perspective. That's good. Well, Aaron, I've got a lot more questions. Our time's gone fast here, but I guess whenever you're in a position like you are, where you're switching positions, you're getting a role that's going to have a lot of spotlight. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of other questions for you. They want to get to know you more. I know you're going to be speaking at that convention coming up here in a few months or a few weeks, I guess. But if people want to get to know you better, if they have questions for you, if they want to follow up, and I guess you said you are going to stay in Oregon, that's your plan. But so is there just a lot of Zoom calls in your future? Or if someone's just really anxious to start to get to know you, how can we do that? Is just catch you at convention, or what's the good way to kind of take the next step with you?
Well, I can tell you my July right now looks like I'll be in Sioux Falls, Fresno, Bakersfield, Oklahoma City, Wichita, and Omaha. I think I'm home 5 days in July. It won't always be like that, but again, I'll be traveling quite a bit. And one of the things, I would say to any pastors listening, just the answer is yes. If you're wondering, would he come to my church and want to speak? I would love, obviously I can't be at 200 churches in the next year, but that's one of the things I really look forward to is connecting at our churches. In this time of transition, probably one of the easiest ways to get hold of me is via email. My email, to say it out loud, is Aaron, Aaron @usmb.org. The remainder of June is really wild. On Monday, I fly back to Ohio to help my in-laws move out to about 10 minutes from our house. And then I'm home for a few days. And my sort of recoup time before I jump into this role at the end of the month, I get to spend about a little over a week on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho with gloriously no cell service, totally cut off world around
Nice.
you with friends. So I say that to say, if somebody reaches out to me in June, please don't be offended if, I'm a little slow to respond. But, stepping into this role, one of the things I'm really aware of is there's no shortcut to relationship. That's the foundation of trust. And if we're going to be working together, if somebody's going to give me the time of day at all, that's going to come out of probably relationship. And so I would absolutely invite people to reach out and wherever I can make time and availability, whether that is Zoom like this or something in person, certainly do my best to make time. That's one of the things I look forward to the most. So,
Well, it's been great getting to know you even a little bit today. I hope our listeners feel like they know you at least a little bit better. And we should probably do another one because there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, but we'll hopefully hear some more convention. We'll love to have you on the podcast again sometime soon. So we're just excited, Aaron. There's a lot of good things ahead. I agree with you that this is a good and exciting time for our USMB family, and I can't wait to see how things go under your leadership. A lot of exciting things. So thanks for saying yes to a really intimidating job. We're excited to work with you. So thanks for being here.
yeah, I'm super honored to step into this role and thank you. And I just say, maybe we need to plan a check-in in a couple months, and you can ask me how things are going, or ask me why hasn't this changed yet, or why did this change. So yeah, I'd love to continue this conversation.
Cool. Awesome. And of course, we'll just take the opportunity to make sure people come to convention. That'll be a really great time to get to know you a little bit better, hear from you. I know you're going to speak there, and I'm sure you'll be around the whole week. So if you haven't yet signed up for conventions, you can come here, Aaron, speak.
Well, not so you can come hear me speak, so you can connect with our family and build some relationships, right? Like,
yes, absolutely.
That's really what it's about. So, and I'm as excited as about all the things happening out in the hallways and around breakfast and dinners I am, certainly speaking. That I'm looking forward to that. But
sure,
a big reason we do this is it's so we can be connected with each other.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. Well, we'll see you then, if not before. Thanks for your time, Aaron.
Great. Thank you so much.
USMB Gathering 2024 in Omaha, Nebraska, July 23rd through the 27th, features a slate of workshops designed to highlight ways we can be salt and light in the world. Topics include parenting, empowering the next generation, higher education, prayer, outreach, and life's difficulties. With 5 options in each track, you're sure to find topics of interest. To see a list of presenters or to register, visit usmb.org/gathering2024 or call 1-800-257-0515.
Well, once again, thank you so much for listening today. And Aaron, welcome aboard. We're so excited to have you on the team, and we look forward to really many great years under your leadership. So I hope for those of you listening, hope this interview was helpful for you to get to know Aaron a little bit. And one more time, I'll just echo our invite to come to Omaha this summer. That'd be a great chance to, of course, like Aaron said, he is not the primary draw, but I'm sure many of you are excited and curious to meet him. So I do encourage you to do that if you haven't yet. And as we close, I just wanted to kind of throw out an invite to be praying for Aaron. As he mentioned in this interview, he's got a pretty crazy summer, as you might expect, might understand, as he's doing quite a bit of traveling and, of course, leaving his church and getting ready for this new role. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, a lot of travel. I'm sure there's just a lot of things on his mind. So as the USMB family, I just invite you to remember him in your prayers, and if time allows, maybe even shoot him a quick email just to introduce yourself, let him know that you're praying for him, that you're encouraging him. I'm sure that would mean a lot as he gets settled in this new role. All right, so thanks again so much for listening. Hope you have a great week. Hope you have a great start to the summer season, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.